Welcome to UCEA EdTalk. So for those of you who are unfamiliar with the EdTalk, very similar to a TED Talk, riveting discussion, conversation with some remarkable people. And today we're going to have some informative discussion about Detroit and Detroit's public education system. I am just introducing this session, but our facilitator, Dr. Terrance Green, will facilitate the discussion. So I just want to tell you a little bit about Dr. Green. He's an assistant professor at the University of Texas at Austin in the Educational Administration Department. His research focuses on principles and school and community engagement, development, and the geography of educational opportunity. In 2016, Dr. Green was the recipient of the William J. Davis Award for the most outstanding article published in a volume of Educational Administration Quarterly. He received his PhD from the University of Wisconsin-Madison, and he's a former high school science teacher. So without any further ado, I will introduce Dr. Green, who will get us started to talk about the fight for equity, dignity, and public education in Detroit, frontline perspectives.
Thank you. Good evening. Welcome to today's session that's entitled The Fight for Equity, Dignity, and Public Education in Detroit, Frontline Perspectives. Before we begin, if we could just give a round of applause to the Executive Committee for creating this space where we can engage in this type of critical dialogue and discussion. So today's Ed Talk is focused on the city of Detroit and its public schools that have been deeply impacted by emergency management, massive school closures, the proliferation of charter schools, the brink of bankruptcy, and a host of other neoliberal policies that have destabilized black schools and neighborhoods in the city, as well as constrained the context in which teachers teach and leaders lead. Yet, despite this complex and contested context and mainstream narratives that portray Detroit as a city of despair, Detroit is a place where advocates continue to resist and fight for equity, dignity, and public education for children. Let's be clear, Detroit has a spirit that will never die. This session will engage in rich and interactive dialogue with various stakeholders who are engaged in advocacy work on the ground, aiming to right educational wrongs in Detroit. As such, I've asked our dynamic panelists to address the following questions. Number one, what is the current state of public schools in Detroit from your perspective? Talk about the strengths, and also what do you see as challenges, and there may be even a third space there, not to be in a binary. Number two, how and in what ways is your advocacy addressing some of these challenges and building on the strengths that you've highlighted, and what are the major priorities in your work? And then finally, what roles might educational leaders, principals, superintendents, policymakers, students, parents, community-based organizations, what role might they play in addressing these issues in Detroit and in similar contexts that face similar issues? While the panelists will only have 15 minutes for their presentations, we've purposefully scheduled time to engage in dialogue. Our panelists represent a range of positionalities and perspectives that may converge and may diverge, and that is perfectly fine. We're excited about the perspectives that they all bring to this table. All right, I'm going to introduce the panelists in the order in which they will present. First, we have Ms. Ivy Baily, who is the interim president of the Detroit Federation of Teachers, or DFT. She has also served as the executive vice president for DFT and the vice president of AFT, Michigan. She earned her Bachelor of Science degree in Special Education from Calvin College in Grand Rapids, Michigan, and earned her master's degree in Special Education from the University of Maryland, College Park. Ms. Baily has been active in DFT, serving as alternative building representative, school union, and on various other committees. She's been elected several times as the Michigan delegate to the AFT National Convention and the Michigan Convention. If you would, please give her a round of applause. Next, we have Dr. Jeffrey Robeson, who's on the end. He is the principal of the Paul Robeson Malcom X Academy in Detroit and is known for his leadership in implementing an African-centered curriculum designed to help African American students understand their heritage and how they can incorporate it into their lives for future success. Dr. Jeffrey Robeson is also a 23-year veteran of the Detroit Public School System and has been recognized for his educational excellence by the Michigan Department of Education, the Wayne County RESA, and he received national recognition as he was named the Educator of the Year in 2001 by the Milliken Family Foundation. Dr. Robeson is the first person in the state of Michigan to receive a PhD in African American and African Studies, Education Issues, and Policy. I got it right. From Michigan State University. Please give him a round of applause as we welcome him. Then finally, last but not least, we have Dr. Tom Pedroni, who is a professor of curriculum studies and policy sociology at Wayne State University. He's also the director of the Detroit Data and Democracy Project. He earned his PhD from an awesome university in Madison, Wisconsin. He has a PhD in curriculum and instruction. He's the author of a phenomenal book called Market Movements, African American Involvement in School Vouchers, which won the 2009 Critic Choice Book Award for the American Educational Studies Association. Tom brings a much needed and critical voice to education in Detroit and provides research to grassroots community activists. Please give him a round of applause as we welcome him. All right, without further ado, I will sit down so people who live and work in Detroit can talk about their work. So Ms. Ivy Baily, you may come.
Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the city of Detroit. So when they asked me to do this, when the council came to me, I was like, okay, here we go. What do I do in 15 minutes? There's so much that has been happening here in the city of Detroit when it comes to education. So hopefully I can capture a little bit of what's been going on here. So as many of you know, our school district has kind of been up under attack. There's a saying, and I don't know if you guys have seen the shirts, Detroit versus everybody. We feel that we're kind of DFT versus everybody up under Detroit Public Schools because there's always been this us and them back and forth with the State Department in Lansing, with the legislators in Lansing. So right now, I kind of feel, in my opinion, our school district is at an important crossroads. Basically, it's kind of like we have an extreme challenge, but that challenge, along with that challenge, we're crossing some hopeful opportunities here. We have, we just had an election. We have a newly elected school board, and I don't know how closely you guys have been watching that, but there's controversy around that, but we do have a new elected school board who is supposed to take office in January. And so now we will no longer be up under emergency management per se, but we still have what's called Financial Review Commission that still oversees what the school board will be doing. So kind of still we under emergency management. So the emergency manager laws, PA 72 and PA 4, PA 72 was the emergency financial law when the emergency managers were supposed to come in and they were supposed to deal with our finances. Many of us were really a little confused and perplexed as to why they were coming here to deal with our finances when we really were not in financial ruin. Then you have PA 4, which enhanced the emergency emergency financial management law. They kind of gave the emergency management managers more power. And not only were they dealing with the finances of the district, but they were dealing with the curriculum and the education portions and the everyday dealings of what goes on in the school system. So the focus for those who were in charge actually had nothing to do with quality education. The focus for those in charge was to basically create what we have now, which is a system of broken policies. And it's a system of broken procedures, and it's a system of broken people. We kind of joke amongst ourselves as educators here in Detroit, and a lot of us feel that we're in this abusive relationship. And we're in this abusive relationship, we just can't get out of it. But the reason why we can't get out of it is because at the heart of what's happening here in Detroit Public Schools is our teachers and our support staff. They care about the children in the city of Detroit. And over the years, and I'm going to have a couple slides to highlight some of the things that have been happening to us over the years, but it's hard when you're a Detroiter and you grew up in Detroit public schools and you knew the quality school system that we had. It's hard to leave and not feel some type of hope because we feel that we can come back to that. This is the 21st century, and we feel that we still have quality educators. Many of our educators have doctorate degrees, and they stay here because they love the children and they love what they do, and they love this city. Many of us are Detroiters. We went to Detroit public schools. We just love it. I mean, you kind of have to be a Detroiter to know, so there's a thing with Detroit, once in Detroit, you just love it. My husband was in the military. We traveled all around the world, and I asked myself a lot of times, why did you come back to Detroit? But it's my home, and I really love it. I've wanted to come back here and work at Detroit Public Schools. I enjoy the culture and the climate of the students that I work with. So I'm going to fast forward a little bit. So I ended up in this position as the interim president of the Detroit Federation of Teachers. At heart, I'm a teacher, and I'm also a fighter, but I guess, sometimes, and we'll talk about that later, the fight that I feel that we have now is not the same fight that we used to be able to do back in the 70s and the 80s when we were 12,000 members strong. Also here in Michigan, there have been laws to weaken unions. And I know it's not just happening in Michigan, it's happening across the United States. So let me kind of go through a couple of slides and show you a little bit of what's kind of been happening to us here in Detroit up under emergency management. So I hope I get this right. So up under emergency management in Detroit, it created a crisis in Detroit public schools. Like I said, when they came here, they say they came because we had budgetary issues. Many of us understand and believe that, no, that's not why they came here. We had a bond that was passed, and there was lots of money in that bond, and the two gentlemen that are here with me may speak to that also. But they came because they wanted to get their hands on the bond money. Right. So what's happened to the teachers, instead of us being able to continue to have decent wages and things, and with all that money that was there, we started getting pay cuts. Healthcare costs started going up. There was threats of layoffs of our teachers, and actually there were some layoffs. There was privatization of our support staff, and then other school staff